What's up guys, you're watching Life by TCG. Another update for my Tortured Existence deck. The last video got 2 thumbs down and no thumbs up, so that was a bit sad. So reserve your judgments at the end of the video. I'm filming in the daytime now. I fixed the glare issue I think, so hopefully you can see all this. And I made some pretty big changes to the list. So I cut 8 different cards, so quite a substantial change. So just getting into the list quickly, I got 4 forests, 8 swamps, 4 jungle hollow, 4 Golgari Guildgate, 3 Golgari Rot Farm. So compared to the previous list, we cut 1 land, we cut 1 Evolving Wilds. So I noticed that in the late game I was getting flooded quite a lot in the games where I didn't draw Tortured Existence, or games where I had Tortured Existence and I didn't have a Dredger. So I felt like cutting 1 land was okay, and I've made another change to sort of compensate for that. So as usual we have 4 Commune with the Gods and 4 Tortured Existence, of course, but I've added in more non-creature spells. Professional YouTuber getting all sorts of notifications. Just ignore those, I suppose. So the other non-creature spell, 4 Vessel of Nascency. So in the past I always thought that 4 Commune with the Gods was enough, right? You'd rather just play more creatures, and this was enough dig. So I just noticed that the most games I was losing were the games where I didn't draw Tortured Existence, or games where I had Tortured Existence but I didn't have a Dredger, so I just keep drawing extra Tortured Existences or just lands, and I couldn't get myself access to a creature every turn, and I would eventually just lose. So Vessel of Nascency is good for solving both of those problems, right? Because it helps you dig towards Tortured Existence and it helps you dig through your deck to find a Dredger. So the downside of Vessel of Nascency is that it replaces itself 1 for 1, and you have to spend 3 mana on it. But actually the cards that we cut for this are not really other early game cards. So in a way it doesn't really affect it doesn't really slow you down that much, even though it is a card that is a 3 mana cantrip that quote unquote should slow down the deck. And compared to Commune, it is nice that it can sometimes hit a land as well. So overall, I played some matches, some rounds with only 2, and then I went up to all 4. It's just really good. The slight downside now is that you do notice the fact that you have so many lands that come into play tap. You do notice that slightly more when you have these 1 mana green spells that you could be playing on curve, but then you have a land that comes into play tapped, and now you have to spend mana just to cycle through this. That does noticeably slow you down a bit, but the payoff in terms of consistency is worth it. So yeah, I was really happy with this, and also that's part of the justification for why we could cut 1 land, because this is a cantrip that can help you find the extra land. So that's a pretty big change for the deck, to cut creatures and play 4 of these, but I do think it was a good decision. So onto the creatures. We have a few less creatures now, but mostly the same as last time, so I'll just go through this really fast. 4 Putrid Leech again, 3 Brownscale, I don't have anything new to say about these, so I'm just zooming through it. 3 Crypt Rats. If you do have any questions, just let me know in the comments, because I have quite a few videos now and you don't really want to go through watching all those to get all my thoughts about this. 2 Stinkweed Imp, 2 Fume Spitter, 2 Krosan Tusker, and then the other old cards, 1 Penumbra Spider, 1 Caustic Caterpillar, 1 Horror of the Broken Lands, 1 Grave Scrabbler, only 1 now. I was playing 2 before, I'll talk about that in a second. And the 1 Yavimaya Elder. So in the last video, this was kind of like a new idea that hadn't really been tested yet at all. And now I do think this is really strong. So a lot of people, you see them play like Tilling Treefolk, which I did play in the past and now I've cut it. So the reason is that in the late game, or in the late game, when you have like a medium amount of lands and you can really turn the corner by getting 2 more lands, because this is a deck that can really make use of every single one of its mana every turn, like no matter what. So having extra lands in the late game makes a big difference, right? So the Treefolk seems like a good card, but the problem is that there's not really any special situation where getting 2 lands from your graveyard is better than getting 2 lands out of your deck. Like in some real corner cases, maybe you're worried about decking out, you don't want to thin your deck, it'd be better to get lands out of your graveyard. Or if you have non-basics to return with the Treefolk, like if you return the Rot Farm, that can be like returning 3 lands, or if you have cycle lands in your graveyard, then there's some more utility that way. So Treefolk might seem better in these situations, but the problem is that in the early turns, when you're trying to set up your mana, like you probably don't have many or any lands in your graveyard at that point. Treefolk is just like a brick in the early game, compared to the Yavimaya Elder, which always finds 2 lands. And the other thing is that this card is just like a 3-for-1 always, which is pretty powerful in Pauper, when a lot of the games are just about both players like trading off cards and grinding card advantage or non-stop, like versus mono black control and things like that. You just want to have as many cards as possible. So I've been really happy with Yavimaya Elder. I like the 1 copy. I do think you want 1 Yavimaya Elder and 2 Krosan Tusker. Like you might be thinking, well, should I cut all the Krosan Tuskers and play Yavimaya Elders instead, or something like that? So the reason why just 1 Yavimaya Elder is better is because Krosan Tusker can't get counterspelled. The cycling ability, obviously, which is that's important. And also, when you play Yavimaya Elder on turn 3, you don't get a land straight away, but with Krosan Tusker you can. That's also important. And the other reason is because Yavimaya Elder is double green, and Krosan Tusker is only 1 green to activate it, and that can come up quite a lot as well. So a lot of the comments I always get on this list are like, you're playing too many come into play tap lands, but you have like a few cards that are double green, which you want to play like reasonably early. Like you want to play Putrid Leech on turn 2, if you can get that. This is double green on turn 3, and then like at the same time you want to have triple black on turn 5, so you can play Crypt Rats and activate it for 2 straight away. So like the color demands of the deck are reasonably high, and like I could see myself trimming maybe 1 or 2 of the come into play tap lands, but the mana demands of this deck are like way higher than you would expect for 2 colors, so just be aware of that. So then I have 4 new cards. So I cut 1 Grave Scrabbler, and I added 1 skeleton back. So when I very first started playing this deck, I had 2 skeletons and no scrabblers, and then I moved to 2 scrabblers and no skeletons, and now I'm playing 1 of each. So the reason for this is that in a lot of games when I felt myself sort of like getting a bit flooded and I had no Tortured Existence or like any repeatable mana sink or anything like that, I would just have Grave Scrabblers and they would just be 4 mana 2/2s that didn't do anything. But at least this can return itself every turn and just chump block, which sounds like a really dumb thing. You know, it doesn't seem like that powerful of a thing to be doing, like, aren't you just losing that game anyway? But at the same time, like in games where you need the card advantage from Grave Scrabbler, you're probably like very late in the game, and while this is slightly more inefficient or slightly less efficient than Grave Scrabbler at like returning lots of things, it doesn't really matter that much. You know, like it's slightly worse, but at that point, if that's what the game is about, skeleton should still be enough to get you the win. So I do like the split of 1 of each. So far that seems good enough. 2 more cards. So I'll talk about what I cut first. So I cut the Treefolk. I already talked about why I did that. I cut the Deadly Recluse because, like I said, it's just not a very efficient card. It's always a bit underwhelming. I cut the Mindlash Sliver because I just, in the end, I realized it was just too cute. Like at the point where your opponent has 0 to 1 cards in their hand, and you have like a Tortured Existence loop with like things on you're like a hit on the board, or you have Scrabbler going or whatever. Like Mindlash Sliver, yes, you look clever because you discard your opponent's card every turn or whatever, but you know, you could just return a Putrid Leech and play a Putrid Leech every turn and you would be ahead of their draws anyway. So Mindlash Sliver is just pointless. And then in the games you're struggling, it's a 1 mana 1/1. So it's bad, right? So I cut it. And the Thorn of the Black Rose I cut as well because like it's a similar thing, right? It's only good in games where you are already ahead, pretty much, because you don't play to the board very well, at least not in the early game. It was often the case that like you would play Thorn of the Black Rose in a situation where the game looked like pretty even, and then but then then they would get the Monarch, and then suddenly they would snowball ahead, and you couldn't come back. And of course, you can say, well, the argument is that you just have to identify spots where you can't play the card, and be smart about when you cast it. But if this is happening so often that it's like an important consideration, then shouldn't you just not put the card in your deck? Like if it's going to be dead like a noticeable percentage of the time. So I cut the Thorn of the Black Rose from the main deck as well. So the 2 cards I have added are 2 Liliana Specter. It's not a very interesting card. Like it just does what it says on the tin, basically. Like it's a 2 mana, it's a 3 mana 2/1 flyer, and they discard a card when you play it. So there's nothing tricky about it. More commonly played than the list in Pauper is Chittering Rats, which has a better triggered ability. But because this deck is so light on removal, you want to have extra ways to interact with flyers. So the fact that this blocks Glinthawk and especially Delver of Secrets is really good. And also having access to evasive attackers is quite good in some situations as well. So yeah, and it's just like a generically, I wouldn't say like powerful or strong, but I should have disconnected my Wi-Fi before I started recording this. Sorry about that. Anyway, it's not insanely powerful or anything like that, right? But just the fact that it's always a 2-for-1 means that it helps sort of like, it just elevates the power of the deck like a little bit compared to cards like Mindlash Sliver or Tilling Treefolk, which are really situational. Like the floor on this card is just much better. So I think this is a good decision. I like playing 2 Liliana Specter. I've been pretty happy with it. And the last card is 1 Sinuous Vermin. So this is a bit strange. Like I haven't ever seen anybody else play this card. So what it does, it's a 2 mana 2/2. For 5 mana, it has Monstrosity 3, so it becomes a 5/5. And then when you monstrous it gets Menace. So this is just like an early 2-drop that can block a Ninja of the Deep Hours or whatever, and then in the late game, for like a lot of extra mana, it can become a 5/5 Menace, which is pretty powerful for a common. So there's nothing too exciting about this card either. It's pretty straightforward in what it does. And this is the card in the deck I'm most unsure about. But I wasn't unhappy with it. It's just one of those cards you can't really be that unhappy with, because it's either it's a bear. It's like a bear with kicker, right? Like one of those cards from the new set. So it can never really be that bad, but there might be something better. So for the main deck, I was actually overall really solidly happy with this. So the cards that I could cut from the main deck, or that I would think about cutting from the main deck, are this, the Caterpillar. I'm not sure if this is like too narrow to have in your main deck, but I just keep it around because it deals with a lot of strange things. So maybe this is wrong. Like I'm slowly removing all these pieces that are like a little bit situational and just replacing them with generically good things, which is a interesting progression, you can see. So yeah, so maybe this is wrong. And then the Penumbra Spider is solid, but maybe unnecessary. Like I'm not unhappy with it, but it's just one of the cards that stands out as being underwhelming in some games. So yeah, so only these 3 really are cards that I'm uncertain about. Like the rest of the list I'm actually really happy with. And then the sideboard, 3 Deadweight, 2 Gnaw to the Bone, 3 Spore Frog. So I moved all the Spore Frogs to the sideboard because in some matchups I do think that effect is really good. But it's just too much of a weak card to play in your main deck when the most popular decks are like Delver and Monarch and things like that, where this card's just not very strong. 2 Tainted Well. I have tested this against Tron, I actually think it's alright, but it's not that good either. And you don't necessarily need it to beat Tron. And it's not even like a awesome card against Tron anyway, because they can just play Ghostly Flicker on the land that you enchant, and then the aura will fall off. 3 Faerie Macabre. Still good. 1 Wickerbough Elder, and I put the Thorn of the Black Rose in the sideboard because it's a powerful effect in the matchups where you know it's going to be good, so it's a nice card to have on the side. So yeah, I'll end the video here. If you have any suggestions for the sideboard or for other main deck cards I could be playing over these, just let me know. I hope you enjoyed that video. Hope the notification noises didn't bamboozle you too much. But yeah, I'll see you guys next time. This is Li-Fi TCG signing up.